I'm Erin O'Byrne and welcome to Everything EFL podcast. I'm passionate about serving teachers and I offer training for schools and institutions whose language teachers need a little refresher, a change of mindset and some super practical ideas to put into their classrooms straight away. There is no one-size-fits-all lesson plan, but you've got a friend and support system in me. I can help reduce your overwhelm, give you some teacher inspiration, and improve your work-life balance. How? With some solid advice, takeaways you can try out immediately, and some much-needed teacher love, because your well-being is important too. Are you ready to make small changes one step at a time and remember how amazing you are? Let's go! Hello, you gorgeous teacher. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're brand new to Everything EFL podcast, you are most welcome and I hope you stick around. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to everybody who downloaded my new freebie. Very happy about that. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's called Mindful Grammar. It's in the show notes and it just shows you 7 really common grammar structures and some little tasks and sentence frames that are, very much have a positive spin. And it's just one way to kind of blend in and integrate that positivity and mindfulness and mindset into your grammar lessons. All right, I'm not proud of myself, guys, about the clickbaity title, but look, my lesson fell off a cliff. Kind of did, kind of didn't. What I mean is it just didn't go according to plan. But, we've talked about this a lot. It's okay. It just means it wasn't a bad thing. It just completely, the trajectory of it completely changed. Wasn't one of my finest lessons, but, with that kind of reacting in the moment, yeah, it's not going to be perfect, but that's fine. Do you know what I mean? It's more spontaneous and I think more enjoyable. So my plan was we were going to do a bit of present perfect. It was coming up in the book. And also the day before, would you rather sort of came up in the lesson. I think it was one of the follow-up questions to a text or something like that, and I thought, okay, let's do a few would you rather questions. And it soon became very apparent that yes, they could say I would rather do this, but when they started giving their explanations, my students that is, there was no sort of conditional tense being used. And I thought, okay, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this because we're doing grammar anyway, but I just, the emergent language is there, I can't ignore this. So I thought we're going to touch upon it, and then move on. Not spend too much time on it, but just raise students' awareness of it. It wasn't the main point of the lesson. But, you know yourself, whenever you teach the second conditional, especially at sort of an intermediate level, there are going to be problems. It's something you have to kind of revisit. They're not going to get it the first time round. So, I think most of them have studied it before, but let's touch upon it, let's talk about it and move on. So when they see it again, it's not completely new to them. And just as a little digression here, I think both of these things that I'm talking about, the present perfect and the second conditional, I think they're quite important if your students want to go to upper intermediate or B2. They can't really be struggling too much with either of these grammar points. So I like sort of doing a bite-sized approach, little and often, lots of input. We talk about input being useful for really low levels, but I think with the complex things like present perfect and second condition, I think input is essential as well. What am I talking about? I'm talking about those sort of receptive activities with lots of context around common phrases and things like that. Not a lot of production, just lots and lots of examples and exposure in different contexts and situations first. So I started the lesson with a warmer and then I wrote just a few examples of yesterday's emergent language with would you rather. So, things like if I am thirsty, I will find water. Instead of if I was thirsty, I would find water. I think the would you rather question was something like, would you rather get lost in the jungle or desert? Something like that. So we did a bit of concept checking and sort of we talked about the concepts of real and unreal and sort of made the corrections and, why. And then I asked a question, and I've included this in because I think this is something that a lot of teachers don't really think about, maybe, and they don't make their students aware. And I'm all about letting your students in on everything you possibly can if it helps them make sense. Because let's face it, there's a lot of confusion around why are we using a past tense when we're talking about the present or future. For example, if I was rich or if I were rich, I would buy a house. Okay, talking about the present or future, using a past tense here. And the answer is always no. So we're going to digress, guys, and we're going to talk about aspect. There's tense and there's aspect. Do you know what I mean by that? Your tenses are your present, your past. Some say future, some say it's not a tense. Hey, that's an argument for another day. But aspect is more about how we see time. So like, even if you think about, you've got like a simple aspect, you've got a perfect aspect, you've got a progressive aspect. So, you know, we're looking at time in slightly different ways. Is it longer? Is it shorter? Is it a sequence of events? Is it regular? And we can talk about aspect when we're talking about past tenses. Now, and this is how I explain it to my students. I say, we use the past for 3 different reasons. Now, all of them fall under the category of creating distance. Now, the first one is to create distance between now and the past. That's the most obvious one, you know, like I go out every day, I went to the pub last night. We change the verb to go, so it's very clear that we're not talking about now, we're talking about a past time, right? Secondly, to create distance in terms of formal and informal language. So the example I always give is informal, can you help me? Formal, I was wondering if you could help me. So you actually have 2 past structures there. And this creates a polite way of speaking, therefore creating that distance. Thirdly, to create distance between what is real and what is unreal. And by this time, I already had some examples on the board, but I always use this one because I think it's quite a good one. Everyone can relate to it. If I have time, I will help you, versus if I had time, I would help you. And you can sort of talk about the ins and outs of that. So I thought, you know, maybe we might return to that, we might not. But like I said, it was more of a sort of awareness raising and move on. But I encourage you to think about, like, you know, explaining time in terms of aspect, not just tense. How do we look at that time? What kind of language can you use around that to explain the difference between like a continuous and a simple, or a simple and a perfect, for example? Make sure the language is, you know, accessible for your students, because so many times you say, you know, why is this? It's, oh, it's present perfect. Yeah, okay, but why? Can you explain why? Do you have the words to explain why? No. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to provide you with a list of words. Choose one of these phrases to explain why it's present perfect, for example. Again, noticing, guys, I talk about this all the time. And then I thought to myself, all right, let's just sort of, this is the cliff diving bit here. Let's just go completely off plan and do some reflection. So I wrote some reflection questions on the board, and I explained the importance of it. You know, it's all part of the learning process. You know, we're often very focused on the outcome. We should be focused on sort of the journey and how we got there, and the whys and the wherefores. So, you know, it was like, what part of this was the most interesting? Can you compare this conditional structure to the structure in your language? Do you have the same thing? Did you find the whole aspect thing interesting? Do you feel you still need practice? And then, you know, I was listening to these conversations, and then one of my students actually started talking about different TV series and how, you know, how conversations digress, and how he learns English. You know, this is how he learns English. So I thought, and then he asked, what else can I do? And I thought, okay, teachable moment. What do the group do to improve English outside of class? What are they planning to do? Let's have a brainstorm. Some students suggested reading. Great, they always say that. Invariably, you get one of 2 responses. One is, oh, I hate reading. And the second one is, I've never read a book, it's too difficult, because they're thinking about reading Harry Potter or something. So I always say to them, okay, first of all, there are graded readers online, something for you guys you could use in your class or encourage your students to use. On YouTube, they have a channel called Learn English Through Story, and they have, like, you know, a graded reader. So it comes up on the screen and there's somebody narrating, and if you're lucky, you can find a corresponding PDF, and then they have the text they can take home as well. You can do lots of noticing activities and comprehension questions with that. Also, I went into sort of the Stephen Krashen mode of things, where you should be able to understand 80% of what you read. So, you know, if you read the first few paragraphs and that number is, you know, you're not hitting that number, put it down, find something else. Again, this is where graded readers come in. I mean, you might argue it's not authentic, but at the end of the day, it's something, okay? And if it's something they can achieve, they can read it and actually feel like they've achieved something, why not? If you want to listen to an episode about the whole Stephen Krashen and input thing, go way back to episode 76, where I interviewed Ollie Richards, who's a bit of an expert about this kind of thing. One student, his suggestion was, come to class. You know, how can we improve our English? Come to class. I said, fine, but And then I always give the same analogy when this comes up in class. I always ask, has anyone ever learned a musical instrument? Now, because of the kinds of students I have, they have, or their parents have the money to pay for a language course, there's usually one person who has had the luxury of learning a musical instrument. So someone said yes, in fact, 2 people did. And then I asked the same question. And then I ask another question, how many hours did you do of lessons a week? A couple of hours, 45 minutes or whatever. And then my next question is, how many hours of practice did you do a week? And, this answer is always significantly higher than the actual hours of lessons. And then I asked, what helped you improve the most, the lessons or the practice? And 100% of the time, the answer is the practice. Now, if this musical instrument analogy won't work for your students, choose football or something else your students can relate to, okay? But they have to understand that coming to class is not enough. And then I thought, okay, while we're at it, let's set some goals to achieve by next Monday. So we brainstormed a few ideas and we looked at breaking down those goals. So for example, and this is really important, guys, the more you break down those goals with your students, the more likely they are to achieve it. So one of them said they wanted to read. Okay, all right, so what are we talking about here? Are we talking about a chapter a day, 10 pages a day, 5 pages a day? Break it down and make it achievable. And then somebody said they're going to watch something. All right, how many episodes a week? One of them asked for some suggestions about what to watch. And I did recommend things that maybe are slightly shorter. So everybody said Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Big Bang Theory, that kind of thing, because the episodes are quite short. Now, if your students are higher level, by all means, watch something longer. But I think for intermediate students, that kind of 20-minute is quite a nice amount. And then also, when you're talking about are your goals achievable, ask your students to think about, what are your energy levels like in the morning, the afternoon, the evening? How realistic are these goals when thinking about whether you have a job or not, plus energy, and any other plans you're doing? And then I got everybody to write in their book, this week I'm going to, and then they had to write a small goal. And then I asked, why is this important? Why should you set goals and do all of these things? And the answer I was looking for is autonomy. And we talked about what that means and the fact that, if you own the process of learning, that will just do wonders for your motivation, which equals more autonomy, which equals being a better learner. And then we had about 15 minutes just to play with. The present perfect didn't even come into it. I was like, grand, we'll do it tomorrow. That's okay. Oh, just before I forget, it's really important as well to tell your students to do something they're super interested in, because that does everything for your motivation. So if they're not interested in the topic or whatever they're doing, no point. So anyway, look, I understand you have to, complete a certain amount of the syllabus or whatever. But, my point is don't be afraid to let your lesson go a little bit off track if you think that what you're doing is worthwhile for your students. And I think teaching them how to learn is a very important skill. And this kind of way of teaching where things just pop into your head and you're like, okay, let's run with this. It's a really nice way of teaching, even if it's a bit scary sometimes, a bit risky. But step outside your comfort zone, go for it. If it feels right, this is the thing, right? If it feels right, go for it, because you know that what you're doing is worthwhile, okay? You can get to the present perfect later, or you can, get them to read the text for homework or something like that. You can figure it out. It's all good. But I think the quality is more important than the quantity. You'll probably never get through everything you need to do within the year or the course or whatever, but I think, just judiciously selecting certain roads to go down, I don't see anything wrong with that. Make questions your students ask or comments they say a teachable moment. So let's say your students have a question about a particular word, what it means, something like that. If it's a verb, are there some really common verb-noun collocations? Can you just expand on it just a little bit, even if it's just a 5-minute digression? They're engaged. If they're asking questions, they're engaged. So engage them with, any kind of information, pertaining to that language that they're asking about that is kind of relevant to them or resonates with them. So for example, I don't know, let's say highly skilled comes up or skilled comes up, and they say, what does it mean? Collocation, highly skilled. If your students are football mad, who is the most highly skilled footballer in your opinion? Just something like that, just to draw them in just a little bit more. Keep them engaged as much as you can. Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys to it. Okay, again, bit of food for thought there. Don't forget to let me know if there's anything specific you would like me to talk about on this podcast. And just a reminder that I am going to run my Methods and Mindset course next year. I think I've renamed it though. I think I've come up with a good name. Okay, get ready for a little pun here, bit of wordplay. Us teachers love that. It's going to be called Heart and Craft. That's Heart and Craft, the methodology mindset blueprint for language teachers. Yes, it's a mouthful, and no, I don't care. I love it. And I hope you do too. It's going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit better, and even more value than it was before. If you are a member of my newsletter community, you will get the biggest discount. Join my newsletter, check out my show notes, okay? The link to my newsletter is in the show notes, okay? The freebie is also in the show notes that I talked about the other week, Mindful Grammar. If you download the freebie and you're not a member of my newsletter community, you will eventually be funneled into my newsletter community. Now, if you don't really want to be there, that's okay. Just receive your first newsletter and unsubscribe. I'm not going to be offended. Now, if you want to thank me for all this fabulous free content you're getting, consider paying it forward in a couple of different ways. Firstly, recommend this podcast to your colleagues and share it. Talk me up in your staff room. Talk to your director or your principal about me. Secondly, join my newsletter. Sign up to my freebie. Thirdly, if you were considering signing up to my previous Methods and Mindset course, but something stopped you, which is completely natural, by the way, I would love to know why. Not because I want to make you feel bad or uncomfortable, but for my own research. Now, there's an anonymous 4-question survey in the show notes, and I would be very grateful if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill it in and provide me with, a lot of insight as to how I move forward in the new year. And fourthly, my email address is in the show notes, or if you already follow me on social media, send me a message with a testimonial. If you have been a regular listener of my podcast, or if you have been a member of my newsletter community and you feel that it's helped your teaching in some way, can you just shoot me a message and tell me how? I'd love you to be specific. Because again, this informs me as to what I'm doing right, what I'm not doing so right, what resonates with you, and how you're aligning with the things that I'm aligned with. All right, look, it's coming up to Christmas. Most of you are probably really busy. I'm going to leave you to it. As always, guys, please look after yourself. This is a really busy time of year. I can feel myself ramping up for Christmas, and I've still got a to-do list a mile long, and I'm really trying to just pace myself, take it slowly, and I'd like you to do the same. Try and just, get a few minutes a day just for yourself, even if you have to lock yourself in your bedroom and meditate for 5 minutes. Okay? It's your time. You deserve it. Make the most of it. Have a peaceful week and share the love. Bye.